My parents handed everything to their golden brother and expected me to fund their retirement, so I finally refused, walked away, and told this story from my side. To provide some backstory, growing up I always knew my brother Alex was the favorite. You know how some families try to pretend they treat their kids equally, even when it's obvious they don't? Mine didn't even bother hiding it. Alex was their golden boy from day one. He could do no wrong, even when he clearly did. For context, Alex is 2 years younger than me. I'm 34 now, so he's 32, but it's like he's never aged past 16. He's the kind of guy who peaked in high school, or at least he would have if he'd actually graduated. He dropped out halfway through his junior year because he didn't like being told what to do. That was always his excuse for everything. Jobs, school, relationships. It didn't matter. If someone had any kind of authority over him, he was out. Meanwhile, I did everything right. I studied hard, got good grades, and worked part-time during high school to save up for college. My parents owned a small landscaping business, a decent little setup with a handful of employees. It wasn't glamorous, but it kept the lights on and food on the table. They'd make me help out during the summer, trimming hedges, mowing lawns, and lugging equipment around. I hated it, but I did it because I knew it was temporary. I had bigger plans. Alex, on the other hand, would disappear halfway through the day, saying he didn't feel like working or that it was too hot outside. My parents would just shrug it off. He's still figuring things out, they'd say. Figuring things out? He wasn't even trying. After high school, things only got worse. While I was working 2 part-time jobs and taking night classes to get my degree, Alex was bouncing between temp gigs and living at home rent-free. He'd get hired at some retail job or delivery service, and within weeks, he'd quit or get fired because he didn't like being bossed around. It got to the point where my parents stopped asking what happened when he came home unemployed again. They'd just sigh and say, "He'll find something that works for him eventually." Of course, eventually never came. By the time I graduated college and started working as a financial analyst, Alex was still lounging at home borrowing money from our parents to start his own business or invest in a great opportunity. Nothing ever came of those investments. I wish I could say I was surprised by how much they coddled him, but it had been this way since we were kids. If I got a B on a test, they'd lecture me about not trying hard enough. If Alex failed a class, they'd blame the teacher for not understanding his learning style. If I wanted new clothes, I had to save up for them. If Alex wanted new sneakers, my parents would hand over their credit card like it was nothing. It was like we were living in 2 completely different households. Still, I tried to keep the peace. I'd go over for family dinners, listen to my mom gush about how smart Alex was, despite all evidence to the contrary, and nod along to my dad's stories about how Alex was so close to landing a big opportunity. It was frustrating, but I didn't want to be the guy who constantly stirred the pot. I figured, as long as they weren't dragging me into it, I could just let them live in their little bubble. But even then there were cracks, like the time I overheard my mom telling a family friend that I didn't need as much attention because I was self-sufficient, or the time my dad flat out said that Alex had more potential than me because he was creative. Creative? The guy couldn't even stick to a basic budget, but whatever, I let it go because honestly, what was the point? By the time I hit my late 20s, I'd started to distance myself from them. I wasn't cutting them off or anything, I just had my own life. I'd bought a modest little house, built up some savings, and was starting to feel like all my hard work was finally paying off. Meanwhile, Alex was still living at home, mooching off our parents and complaining about how hard life was. The crazy part? My parents were fine with it. They even defended it. "He's just taking some time to find his path," my mom would say. "Not everyone figures it out right away." "Sure, Mom, he's been figuring it out for over a decade now." But again, I kept my mouth shut. It wasn't worth the fight. Looking back, I think a part of me always knew where this was heading. My parents' favoritism wasn't just about emotional support. I just didn't realize how far they'd take it until last year. That's when everything came crashing down. Family dinners with my parents were something I endured, not something I looked forward to. Growing up, I'd learned that skipping one wasn't worth the guilt trip that followed. So once every couple of weeks, I'd head over to their place, make small talk, eat whatever my mom made, and remind myself that this was just part of being a good son. Dinners followed the same routine every time. My mom would call me earlier in the day to remind me to come, even though I'd never actually forgotten. I'd show up, greet my dad, who was usually sitting in his recliner watching sports or some old action movie, and then chat with my mom while she finished cooking. Alex was almost always already there, sitting at the table or on the couch, scrolling through his phone like he had absolutely nothing better to do, which, to be fair, he probably didn't. The food was always solid, my mom was a great cook, but it didn't make up for the awkward conversation. Most of the time, they'd start off harmless enough. My dad would complain about traffic or the weather, and my mom would give me updates about random people I barely remembered from childhood. But no matter where the conversation started, it always found its way back to Alex. Alex has been so busy with the business, my mom would say, like she was trying to convince herself as much as me. Yeah, he's been coming up with some great ideas, my dad would add, nodding like they were talking about some kind of entrepreneurial genius. I'd just sit there, chewing my food and pretending to be interested. I knew better than to argue. No matter how much evidence there was to the contrary, my parents were fully committed to the idea that Alex was turning things around. Once, I made the mistake of asking for specifics. What kind of ideas? I asked, genuinely curious about what Alex could possibly be contributing. My mom started glancing at Alex, who was suddenly way too interested in his plate. He's been talking about expanding into commercial contracts, office parks, malls, bigger projects, she said. Right, Alex? Alex mumbled, not looking up. That's ambitious, I said carefully. I wanted to ask how they planned to pull that off when Alex couldn't even show up to residential jobs on time, but I bit my tongue. Every once in a while, my parents would try to drag me into the conversation. You're good with numbers, Daniel, my dad said one night out of nowhere. You should take a look at the books sometime, maybe give Alex some pointers. Dad, I don't think that's a good idea, I replied. Why not? You could help him out, your family. I glanced at Alex, who was still glued to his phone, and shook my head. I've got my own job to worry about. Besides, Alex seems to have it under control. That shut my dad up, but I could tell he wasn't happy about it. The thing about these dinners was that they weren't just about eating together. They were about keeping up appearances. My parents wanted me there because it made everything seem normal, like we were this big happy family. But the reality was far from it. Alex barely acknowledged me most of the time, and when he did, it was usually to make some snarky comment about how I thought I was better than him because I had a degree and a steady job. My parents, of course, never called him out on it. They'd just sit there, pretending not to notice, or worse, laugh along like he was being funny. One time I brought up something about my work, a project I'd been proud of, and Alex immediately jumped in with, must be nice sitting at a desk all day while other people do the real work. I stared at him, trying to decide if it was even worth responding. Yeah, Alex, I said finally, sitting at a desk is exhausting. You should try it sometime. My dad cleared his throat, and my mom quickly changed the subject. Alex has been thinking about hiring more people for the business, she said, as if that was some kind of groundbreaking news. Really? I asked, raising an eyebrow. Well, not yet, Alex cut in. It's just an idea for now. I wanted to laugh. Of course, it was just an idea. Everything with Alex was just an idea. After dinner, we'd usually sit in the living room for a bit. Alex would sprawl out on the couch, looking bored. I'd sit there, sipping my coffee, counting down the minutes until it was socially acceptable to leave. It wasn't that I hated my family, I didn't, but being there felt like stepping into a time machine. No matter how much my life had changed, nothing about that house or the people in it ever seemed to evolve. It was the same conversations, the same dynamics, the same expectations. They still saw me as the responsible one, the one who didn't need help, the one who could always figure things out on his own. And Alex? He was still the golden boy who needed all their attention and support, no matter how little he deserved it. By the time I left, I always felt drained. It was like the house sucked all the energy out of me. I'd get in my car, crank up the radio, and take a deep breath, reminding myself that I didn't have to live in that world anymore. But no matter how far I distanced myself, I knew I'd be back in a couple of weeks, sitting at that same table, listening to the same conversations, and pretending everything was fine. So, it was supposed to be just another Sunday dinner. I didn't expect much. Same bland conversations, same forced family bonding. I figured I'd show up, eat my mom's lasagna, endure an hour or two of Alex's smirking and my dad's grumbling about the state of the economy, and head home. Easy enough, right? But this time was different. The atmosphere felt weird from the moment I walked in. My mom was unusually quiet, and my dad was sitting at the table instead of his usual spot in the recliner. Even Alex looked uncomfortable, which was rare since he usually parked himself in front of the TV like he owned the place. Hey, what's going on? I asked, dropping my keys on the counter. Nothing, my mom said quickly, her voice a little too high-pitched to be convincing. Dinner's almost ready. Go ahead and sit down. I frowned but did as she said, taking my usual seat at the table. My dad cleared his throat and glanced at my mom, who gave him a little nod. Alex, sitting across from me, was suddenly very interested in his phone. All right, my dad said, his tone more serious than usual. We've got something to talk about. Here we go, I thought. I had no idea what was coming, but it couldn't be good. My dad didn't do serious talks unless he was about to complain about something or deliver bad news. We've been thinking a lot about the future, he continued, his hands clasped on the table like he was about to deliver a corporate presentation. Your mom and I aren't getting any younger, and we want to make sure everything's in order. Okay, I said slowly, glancing between them. My mom jumped in. You know, the business, the house, our savings. We've been trying to figure out the best way to transition things. Transition? That word immediately set off alarm bells in my head. They'd never talked about this kind of stuff before, at least not with me. I figured they had some kind of vague retirement plan, but I'd never pressed them on it because, frankly, it wasn't my business. My dad nodded. We've made a decision. We're going to start stepping back from the business, and we've decided to put everything in Alex's name. I blinked. Everything? The house? The business? The savings? My mom clarified, like she was explaining it to a child. It just makes the most sense. I stared at them, waiting for them to crack a smile or say, just kidding, but they didn't. They were completely serious. Wait, I said, trying to process what I'd just heard. You're giving everything to Alex? Yes, my dad said, like it was the most logical decision in the world. Why? My mom tilted her head, giving me that pitying look she'd perfected over the years. Honey, you don't need it. You've got a good job, a house. Alex needs the support more. Support? I repeated, the word tasting bitter in my mouth. You mean the guy who couldn't even graduate high school and hasn't held down a job for more than 6 months at a time? My dad sighed, already looking annoyed. That's not fair, Daniel. Alex has had a harder time finding his footing. We just want to give him a chance to succeed. A chance to succeed, I said, shaking my head. At what? Blowing through all your money and running the business into the ground? Daniel, my mom said, her tone sharp, that's enough. No, seriously, I said, my voice rising despite myself. You're giving him everything, and I get what, exactly? A pat on the back for being responsible. You don't need anything from us, my dad said, his voice firm. You've always been independent. Alex, on the other hand, could use a little extra help. A little extra help? They were handing over their entire life's work, their house, and their savings to a guy who couldn't even manage his own phone bill. It was beyond insulting, it was infuriating. I looked at Alex, who had finally put his phone down and was watching me with this smug little smirk. He didn't say anything, but he didn't have to. The look on his face said it all. Sucks to be you, bro. Unbelievable, I muttered, pushing my chair back. Daniel, please, my mom said, her voice suddenly shaky. Don't make this into a fight. We're not trying to punish you. We just think this is what's best for the family. Best for the family? I repeated, laughing bitterly. No, this is what's best for Alex. And when he screws it all up, which we all know he will, then what? You'll come to me to fix it? That's not fair, my dad said again, his jaw tightening. Alex is capable, my mom added. He's been stepping up lately, and we trust him to handle this. Stepping up? I snapped. By showing up to work twice a week and scrolling through his phone the rest of the time? Yeah, sounds real responsible. Alex finally decided to speak. You're just jealous, he said, his voice dripping with fake confidence. Just because they trust me more doesn't mean you have to throw a tantrum. I laughed in disbelief. Trust you? That's a good one, Alex. Trust has nothing to do with this. They're just too blind to see you for who you really are. That's enough, my mom said, slamming her hand on the table. It wasn't often that she raised her voice, but when she did, it usually worked. Not this time. No, it's not enough, I said, standing up. You've made your choice. Fine, give everything to Alex. Daniel, please, my dad said, his tone softer now. Don't walk away like this. We're still a family. I shook my head. A family? No, Dad. A family supports each other. This is just favoritism, plain and simple. Without another word, I grabbed my keys and left. I could hear my mom calling after me as I walked out the door, but I didn't turn back. That drive home was one of the longest of my life. My hands were shaking and my mind was racing. Part of me couldn't believe what had just happened, but another part of me wasn't surprised at all. They'd always favored Alex. This was just the natural conclusion of years of coddling and enabling. Still, knowing it didn't make it easier to accept. By the time I got home, I'd made up my mind. I wasn't going to let them drag me into this mess. They wanted Alex to have everything? Fine, but they weren't going to use me as their safety net when it all went sideways. Not this time. After that dinner, I kept my distance, not in a dramatic you'll never hear from me again kind of way, but in a quiet I need some space before I lose my mind way. I didn't block their numbers or anything, but I wasn't answering their calls either. They didn't try that hard to reach out, so I figured we were all okay with the silence. In the first few weeks, it was almost peaceful. No forced small talk, no sitting through another round of Alex's so great stories. I had my evenings back to myself and my weekends free of the emotional drain that came with visiting them. But that peace came with a side of frustration. I kept asking myself the same questions. How could they not see how unfair this is? Do they really think Alex is capable of running a business? What's going to happen when it all falls apart? I wanted to let it go, but the anger just sat there simmering beneath the surface. It wasn't just about the business or the house or even the money. It was about the principle. They'd spent my whole life treating Alex like he was the center of the universe, and now they'd taken it to the extreme. They didn't just play favorites. They handed him their entire legacy on a silver platter and didn't even pretend to include me in the decision. A few weeks later, I got an unexpected update on the situation. I was grabbing coffee with an old friend from high school, Mike, who still lived in the area. We were catching up when he brought up my parents' business. "Hey, how's the landscaping company doing?" he asked, stirring his coffee. "I heard Alex is running it now." "Yeah," I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. "They handed everything over to him." Mike raised an eyebrow. "That's interesting. I ran into Tony the other day. You remember Tony, right? He's been working for your parents forever." "Yeah, I know Tony," I said. "What did he say?" Mike leaned in a little, like he was about to share some juicy gossip. "Apparently, things aren't going great. Tony said Alex has been making some, questionable decisions, taking on jobs they can't handle, underpaying the crew, stuff like that." I sighed. "Figures. He's never been good at thinking things through." Mike nodded. "Tony said your dad's still handling a lot of the day-to-day stuff, but it's clear Alex is in over his head." "Sounds about right," I muttered. "Man, that sucks," Mike said. "Your parents worked so hard to build that business." "Yeah," I said, feeling the frustration bubble up again. "And now they're letting Alex run it into the ground." Hearing that confirmed what I'd already suspected. Alex wasn't capable of running a business, and my parents were too blinded by their favoritism to admit it. But as much as it annoyed me, I wasn't about to step in. The business had been my parents' pride and joy for decades. They'd poured their blood, sweat, and tears into it. And now they were watching Alex fumble his way through. Part of me wanted to call them and say, "I told you so," but another part of me just felt sad, not for them, but for the business and all the employees who were probably scrambling to keep things afloat. After that conversation, I decided to keep my distance even more. But it didn't take long for the cracks to start showing. A few weeks later, I got a voicemail from my mom. Her tone was light, but I could hear the underlying tension. "Hi, honey, it's Mom. Just checking in to see how you're doing. Give me a call when you have a chance. Love you." I didn't call her back. Not because I didn't care, but because I knew exactly what she wanted to talk about. In the weeks that followed, I got a few more voicemails and texts from my mom, all with the same cheerful tone masking what I knew was desperation. Alex, of course, didn't reach out. Why would he? He was probably still riding high on the illusion that he was the big boss, even as everything crumbled around him. For the first time in my life, I felt completely disconnected from my family. And you know what? It wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. I didn't miss the drama. I didn't miss the constant feeling of being second best. I didn't miss the weight of their expectations pressing down on me. After weeks of ignoring their calls and texts, I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd finally gotten the hint. But my parents were persistent, especially when it came to cleaning up Alex's messes. The next escalation came when my mom sent me a long, rambling email. "Daniel," it began, "I know you're upset, but we're really struggling right now. Alex has been under so much pressure, and things just haven't worked out the way we hoped. He's trying his best, but it's a lot for him to handle. Your dad and I are doing what we can, but we're stretched thin. Can you please just talk to us? We need your advice. We need you." I wasn't the one who had put them in this position. They had chosen Alex, given him everything without so much as a conversation with me. And now, when things were falling apart, they expected me to swoop in and save the day. That wasn't my job. A few days later, I ran into one of their former employees, Jeff, at the post office. Jeff had worked for my parents for years, but he'd left the company not long after Alex took over. "Hey, Daniel," he said, spotting me in line. "Got a second?" I nodded, bracing myself for whatever he was about to say. "You heard what's been going on with the business?" he asked, lowering his voice a little. "Bits and pieces," I said. "What's the latest?" Jeff shook his head. "Man, it's bad. Alex has no clue what he's doing. He's been taking on jobs that are way too big for the crew to handle, and he's underpricing everything just to get work. They're barely breaking even on most projects." "Sounds about right," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "And that's not even the worst of it," Jeff continued. "He's been butting heads with everyone. Good guys too, people who've been loyal to your parents for years. A lot of them have quit. It's a skeleton crew now." "Why am I not surprised?" I muttered. Jeff nodded. I hate to say it, but I don't think the company's going to last much longer if things keep going like this. Later that evening, I got another call from my mom. This time I answered. Daniel, she said, her voice equal parts relief and frustration. I've been trying to reach you for weeks. Why haven't you called us back? Because I know what you're going to ask me, and the answer is still no, I said, cutting straight to the point. Daniel, please, she said, her voice cracking. We're in a really tough spot. Alex is struggling, and we don't know what to do. The business is falling apart. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, though my tone probably made it clear I wasn't all that sorry. You have to understand, she continued, ignoring my lack of enthusiasm. We just wanted to give Alex a chance. We thought he'd grow into the role. Well, he didn't, I said bluntly, and now you're dealing with the consequences of that decision. It's not like that. It's exactly like that, I interrupted. I'm not doing it, Mom. I'm done. She didn't say anything for a moment, and I could hear her trying to hold back tears. Finally, she said, I just wish you'd understand. We love you both, Daniel. We never meant to make you feel like you weren't important. You didn't mean to, I said, shaking my head. But you did. Over the next few weeks. I started hearing from other people, relatives, family, friends, even some old neighbors. Apparently, my parents had been telling everyone who'd listen about how difficult things were, and how I was refusing to help. One of my aunts called me, launching straight into a guilt trip. Daniel, what's wrong with you? She said, her tone sharp. Your parents are struggling, and you're just sitting back and letting it happen. That's not how family works. They didn't know this would happen, she continued. They were just trying to do what was best for him, and now they need you. You're really going to turn your back on them? Yes, I said simply. What kind of son is that? She snapped. The kind who's tired of being treated like a backup plan, I replied before hanging up. Meanwhile, the situation with the business kept deteriorating. Alex, true to form, refused to take responsibility for any of it. According to the people I talked to, he blamed the employees, the clients, the economy, anything and everything except himself. My parents, of course, were still defending him. He's doing the best he can, my mom said in one voicemail. It's just a tough time for everyone. But it wasn't just a tough time, it was a disaster. The business was hemorrhaging money, and my parents were on the verge of losing everything. And even then, they couldn't admit they'd made a mistake. One Saturday morning, they came unannounced, just as I was settling into my usual weekend routine, a cup of coffee, a quiet house, and no immediate obligations. The knock at the door was sharp and deliberate, the kind of knock that tells you whoever's there isn't just dropping by for a friendly visit. I opened the door to find my parents standing on the porch. My dad was stiff, his expression a mix of irritation and exhaustion, while my mom was fidgeting with her purse strap, her lips pressed into a tight line. For a moment, I thought about shutting the door and pretending I wasn't home, but I knew they wouldn't leave without saying whatever they'd come to say. Can we come in? My dad asked, though it wasn't really a question. I stepped aside, letting them in. They didn't wait for an invitation to sit. My dad dropped into the armchair like he owned the place, and my mom perched on the edge of the couch, her hand still gripping her purse like a lifeline. There was an awkward silence as I stood there, leaning against the wall, waiting for them to get to the point. I didn't have to wait long. We need to talk, my dad said, his voice firm and heavy with disappointment. Frankly, Daniel, we're disappointed in you. I blinked, caught off guard by the bluntness. Disappointed? Yes, he said. We've been reaching out to you for weeks trying to get you to see reason, and you've ignored us. You're turning your back on your family, and that's not how we raised you. My mom nodded along, her expression mournful. We expected better from you, Daniel. You've always been the dependable one, the one we could count on. But now, when we need you the most, you're just refusing to help. I felt a wave of disbelief wash over me. They weren't here to apologize or even to discuss things rationally. They were here to guilt me into submission. We thought we raised a better man than this, my dad continued, his tone growing sharper. After everything we've done for you, after all the sacrifices we've made, this is how you repay us? By ignoring our calls and leaving us to deal with this mess alone? They went on, listing every supposed sacrifice they'd ever made for me, every time they'd been there for me. My mom brought up how they'd paid for my childhood activities, supported me through tough times, and given me a roof over my head. My dad talked about the long hours he worked to provide for the family, how he'd hoped I'd step up when the time came. And now, my mom added, her voice trembling, you're not just turning your back on Alex, you're turning your back on us. We're getting older, Daniel. We can't keep working forever. We thought you'd understand, that you'd help take care of us when the time came. But instead, you're leaving us with nothing. That was it. That was the real reason they were here. They weren't just upset that I wasn't helping Alex, they were upset that I wasn't stepping in to take care of them too. They'd assumed I'd be their retirement plan, their safety net, the one who would shoulder their burdens when they couldn't anymore. I let them talk. I didn't argue, didn't defend myself, didn't say a word. I just stood there, arms crossed, listening as they laid all their expectations at my feet, as if it were my fault that things hadn't gone the way they'd planned. When they finally ran out of steam, my dad leaned back in the chair, crossing his arms. "You've made it pretty clear where you stand," he said, his tone cold, "and it's disappointing, to say the least." My mom sniffled, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue she'd pulled from her purse. "We don't deserve this, Daniel." I took a deep breath, letting their words settle in the air between us, and then slowly I began to speak. "You're right," I said. "You don't deserve this. You don't deserve to be let into my house or my life again. You deserve to deal with the consequences of your own actions just like everyone else. You decided Alex was the one who needed support, the one who deserved the business, the house, the savings. Let me tell you something. You deserve to get help from him, and now look at you. You're coming to me to clean it up. That's not how this works." My dad opened his mouth to respond, but I held up a hand to stop him. "You don't get to stand here and tell me you're disappointed in me when you've spent my entire life treating me like I don't exist. You don't get to guilt me into helping you after ignoring me for years after making it clear that Alex was the one who mattered. You made your choices and now you get to live with them." My mom started crying, big, ugly sobs that filled the room. My dad's expression hardened, but I could see the defeat in his eyes. They'd come here to shame me, to guilt me into stepping up, and it had backfired. For a moment, no one said anything. Finally, my dad let out a long sigh and stood up. "You're right," he said quietly, his shoulders slumping. "We made mistakes. We thought we were doing the right thing, but we messed up. We should have handled things differently. We should have treated you better." My mom nodded through her tears. "We're sorry, Daniel. We really are. We thought we were helping Alex and we didn't realize." She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. I didn't say anything. What was there to say? Their apologies didn't change anything. They couldn't undo years of favoritism or erase the hurt they'd caused. "We want to make it up to you," my dad said, his voice heavy with regret. "We don't know how, but we want to try." I shook my head. "Anything you do would be too little." "It's too late for that," I said. They left a few minutes later, defeated and apologetic. My mom kept looking back at me as they walked out the door, like she was hoping I'd change my mind. But I didn't. I wasn't interested in rebuilding a relationship under these circumstances. I needed more than words. I needed time and space to process everything. And they needed to focus on fixing the problems they'd created. As for Alex, word on the street is that he's still blaming everyone else for his failures. Apparently, he's been telling people my parents sabotaged him by not giving him enough support, which is hilarious considering they handed him everything. Classic Alex. The good news? I feel lighter these days. Cutting ties wasn't easy, but it's been worth it. I've started focusing on myself for the first time in years. Traveling, picking up new hobbies, and just living my life without their baggage weighing me down. To anyone out there dealing with a similar situation, it's okay to walk away. It's okay to choose yourself. Sometimes the only way to move forward is to let go. Thanks for reading. I'll keep you updated if anything changes, but for now, I'm focusing on me, and it feels good.